All right, great. Thank you everybody again for attending today's Brainfuse webinar. So today we're going to be going over all of the Brainfuse JobNow services available to patrons at the Southern Tier Library System. And so for context, the page you're seeing right now on our screen is in fact your JobNow page. This is exactly what your patrons will see when they access Brainfuse JobNow. And so for context, for folks who might not be familiar, Brainfuse is a company that provides a number of different subscription services to students in schools, in higher education, and in high school and in other grades, in addition to patrons at libraries and in other institutions throughout the country. And in this case, one of our subscription services, the one we're covering today, and the one that the Southern Tier Library System has recently resubscribed to, is JobNow. This is our suite of online assistive services for careers, resumes, cover letters, and a lot more. So we're going to be going over all of those different services available through JobNow today. With that, likely the most important question for your patrons, and many of you in fact today, would be how do your patrons access Brainfuse JobNow? And so in this case, as part of the launch email that was sent to the Southern Tier Library System administrative contacts, Brainfuse link for JobNow was included as part of this, and that can then be included on your library's website. From there, once your patron clicks on this link, they'll then be brought to a page where they're asked to enter in a library card number. And once they've done that, they'll be brought directly to this page. And in fact, they'll see the Southern Tier Library System logo right at the top of the page. So even if a patron's never been here before, they'll at least have some sense of knowing that they're in the right place. And so with that in mind, all of the features of JobNow, in fact, many of the features of JobNow, I should say, are actually available immediately to the patron upon clicking on the JobNow link. Many of the different features that you see below here, which we'll be going into in a few minutes. However, in this case, all of those features become available to any Brainfuse users who elect to create a Brainfuse JobNow account. This is perfectly free, in fact, and does not require any identifying information from the patron whatsoever. All they need is a username and a password of their choice. From there, all they need to do is click on the login link over here, which would be login if I wasn't currently logged in. And then on the preceding page, you'll see a link to sign up. From there, enter in the credentials of your choice, and you'll have a JobNow account created. From there, you're given access to all of the different features of JobNow in full with no restrictions. And in addition to that, you'll also be given access to what we refer to at Brainfuse as account features. These can be found by hovering over your username, which will appear just underneath the log out button once you've logged in. And so you'll see underneath in the drop-down window, these account features appear. Each of these account features you see here relates one or more different ways to the different services that we provide. So as I go through those services today, I'll be pointing out how they relate to these account features and what your patrons can do to get the most out of their access to JobNow altogether. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the services themselves. So Brainfuse JobNow is broken down into a few key sections for the most part. You'll see they're kind of at the center of the page here. We have our resumes, job interviews, and career sections. And in this case, you'll also see those same headers included just up here. And you can actually access all of the different features directly by hovering over these different section headers if you'd like to instead. With that in mind, you'll see a few different kind of options and notifications for patrons before proceeding into those tools themselves. So I'd like to kind of draw your focus to those. To begin with, you'll see this banner right at the top of the page letting your patrons know that JobNow coaches are available every day from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time. So this applies specifically to all of our live coaches that are available on demand to patrons when they need that assistance. And we'll be getting into that in just a few moments. But for the context for patrons, you can always access a resume expert, a job coach, or an interview coach by accessing these tools between the hours of 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time. So we actually fall outside of those hours today, but I'm still going to give you the opportunity to see what a typical live session looked like despite that. Beyond that, proceeding in, you'll also notice a context-sensitive holiday closure message appears right up here in any instances where Brainfuse will be closed for a specific holiday. So you'll see that same notice here available for Memorial Day. For context here, the only services that will be unavailable for these closures on those particular days are the live on-demand coaching services. So these would be our live resume expert, interview coaching, and job coaching options. All of the other features and all of the other asynchronous support services are still available to patrons. So the only thing this applies to are our live on-demand coaches available through these live tools that you see below. From there, you'll also see that Brainfuse regularly creates workshops for students, workshops on different things like resume construction, cover letters, and a lot of different things relating to career services. So when Brainfuse hosts one of these workshops and records them, we put them up on the JobNow page in case your patrons would like to take a look at some fresh content that we create with other kind of experts in these respective fields. And then beyond that, you'll also see a very simple job search area right here. If you have a patron who's accessing JobNow and pretty much knows exactly what they want to go for right away, that's great, certainly. And we want to make sure that there's just a simple job search tool right at the top of the page. So if your patrons enter in a keyword and location of their choice and then click on search, they'll be brought directly into the nearest Indeed search window. So with that in mind, if your patron just wants to start from there, they certainly can. But with that said, let's go ahead and show you guys the actual tools and services available through Brainfuse in these different respective areas here. So you'll notice the first under each of these respective sections, resumes, job interviews, and career, you'll see our live experts are the first available option. And based on what kind of assistance your patron needs, whether they're looking for help in a resume or a cover letter, for example, you'll see the live resume experts here are certainly going to be your best bet. If you're looking for an option for a practice interview or looking to just get some help on what an interview you have coming up and what kinds of questions might come up or how you can kind of best conduct yourself, then you can connect instead to one of our live interview coaches. And then finally, in the career section, our live job coaches are also available for essentially anything that falls outside of those two spheres. So if you're just beginning your job search for the first time and aren't really sure where to begin at all, if you're changing careers at this point in your life and that kind of process is a bit daunting and you'd like some general questions answered about how to kind of begin that process, then a job coach would certainly be your best bet, where a resume or interview coach are a little more specified. And so once you're within those hours of 2 to 11 p.m. Eastern time, you can actually click directly on any of these links and be brought immediately into a session with one of these available on-demand experts. And so with that in mind, I'm actually going to show you guys what a typical session would look like by going a bit of a roundabout way to do so. I'm heading on over into the account features to head directly to the My Calendar area just here. For context, this account feature actually allows your patrons to organize and host their own whiteboard sessions. The whiteboard is where we host all of our live online sessions, whether that's an academic session through our Help Now service, a veteran service assistant session with our Vet Now service, or of course in JobNow, any of the career enhancement sessions that we just described through live resume, live interview, and live job coaches. And so in this case, that whiteboard through which all of our live help sessions take place is accessible here through the My Calendar area if a patron would like to organize their own session through the whiteboard. So with that in mind, I've actually created a session through the My Calendar area just here to enter and show you guys what our whiteboard looks like and what a typical live help session would contain with that in mind. For context though, under the My Calendar area, you can actually invite as many participants as you'd like to one of these particular whiteboard sessions. A live session with one of our resume coaches or interview coaches, for example, is 1-to-1. So it's just one patron and the one coach they're working with. A My Calendar Brainfuse session, a whiteboard session created by the patron directly, you can actually invite as many participants as you'd like to. And the real advantage is they don't even need a Brainfuse account to be able to access this session. All they need is an email address. So enter in the email addresses of those you'd like to invite, along with the date and time and duration of this session in particular. And once you've chosen to save it and enter it, those participants included with their emails will each receive an email with a link to click, and you yourself can enter that session directly through your My Calendar area. You'll see that session saved right here and the options to edit, enter, or cancel that session directly if you'd like to. So I'm actually just going to enter this session again as a demo to show you guys what a typical session would look like with one of our live job coaches, resume coaches, or interview coaches. And so this page that you're seeing here is the Brainfuse whiteboard. This is where all of our live help sessions take place through. And using the different tools that you'll be able to see on both the right and left-hand side of the whiteboard, you're able to exchange different kinds of messages with your coaches, work through them on different problems using the whiteboard directly, and interact with them in a number of different ways. So for context, on the right-hand side first, this is the chat area. So this is typically where the coach and the patron interact for the most part. Any patrons' questions that they have, they'll put right into the chat area. And then, of course, coaches will do their best to work with them through here, answer any questions they can directly, and help them on any issues that they're struggling with. With that said, on the left-hand side over here, this is the whiteboard proper of the whiteboard application. And using the different tools that you see in the vertical and horizontal taskbars over here, you'll be able to interact in the space with your coaches as you need. So for example, you'll see you have the free-handed drawing tool. This is of course selected by default whenever you begin a Brainfuse session. And actually you'll note as we click on the different tools in the vertical taskbar here, those in the horizontal taskbar will actually sometimes adjust to accommodate those different tool options. Many of these different horizontal taskbar options remain throughout a session. For example, you'll see the color wheel icon. This allows you to change the color of anything you place on the whiteboard using any of the tools over here. So any drawing, text, equations, etc., you can change the color of any time through this tool. And typically our coaches and tutors in the academic sense will almost always change the color of anything they place on the whiteboard by default so that it's different from what the student's own markings are. That way it's easy to visually distinguish whose markings are whose. Is it the patrons or is it the coaches as the session begins to fill up with more information? With that in mind, you'll also see remaining throughout the session in the horizontal taskbar is the undo and redo option. So in case your patron made a mistake and would like to undo it, or it turns out the mistake is correct and they'd like to redo it, both of those options are available anytime. In addition to the clear whiteboard option here, which allows you to, as the name describes, either clear the current slide of the whiteboard, also known as its current resting state, since the whiteboard can scroll infinitely to the right or down. And then from there, you also have the option to clear the entirety of the whiteboard if you'd like to. Doing this, as a note, will never remove any of the messages exchanged in the chat area. These remain throughout the duration of your session in full. With that, both the drawing and the erasing tool here actually give you the option to change the marker size, or essentially the size of the tool that you're using. So if you'd like to make any kind of smaller corrections with the eraser tool when there's a drawing on the whiteboard, you can easily do so by just changing the width of the marker itself. From there, back over to the vertical taskbar over here, you'll see we have the text tool. Of course, as the name implies, this allows you to begin writing on the Brainfuse whiteboard. And there's no limit to wherever you'd like to do this. You can simply click on the whiteboard wherever you like and begin typing to your heart's content. You can also very easily copy and paste any text or images directly onto the whiteboard as well using your native keyboard shortcuts. So if you have text from something you're working on, like a resume that you'd like to include right on the whiteboard, or a screenshot from a cover letter or something akin to that, you can easily place it right onto the whiteboard directly with your native keyboard shortcuts. And again, choosing the text tool, you'll see up here, some of these tools up here actually adjusted to give you further options. So any text that you write in, you can adjust to superscript with this tool or to subscript if you'd like to. And here you can change the font properties of your text, whether that's the font itself, the style, or the size of said text. Again, typically our coaches, tutors, and other experts will change the font or style of text they write in by default also. So as text begins to fill up on the whiteboard, it's easy to tell whose markings are whose as that session continues. And so in addition to these different tools over here, you'll also notice, of course, we have a lot of academic focused tools since Brainfuse, in fact, started as primarily an online tutoring company before expanding into other online expert areas. And so with that in mind, you'll see a number of these academic tools remain throughout any session, including the equation editor just here. If you have any math equations you'd like to include onto the whiteboard, no matter how complex they might get, you can easily do so using the equation editor here. And so once you've included this, all you need to do is click on the check mark to add it right onto the whiteboard in really easily legible fashion. A really new addition to the whiteboard, in fact, besides the equation editor itself, is the graphing calculator tool. So if you need to use a graph for anything or would like to graph something and calculate it, the graphing calculator tool is available here as well. In addition to these different tools over here, you'll see we have the line tool as well. This is a very simple option that allows you to drag and drop a line anywhere you might like to directly on the whiteboard. That can be great for underlining sections of text or dividing up the screen as you might need to, and so on. With the whiteboard a bit filled up here, I'd like to head on back over here to show you the edit tool. This allows you to adjust anything that's been previously placed on the whiteboard rather than undoing or clearing the whiteboard. So for example, if you'd like to resize or reorient any of the different lines that you placed on the whiteboard, for example, you can easily do so this way if you'd like. You can even make it diagonal very easily. Beyond that, if you have any text that you wrote on the whiteboard and you'd like to make a smaller adjustment to that, again, rather than kind of undoing the entire text, you can very easily do so with the edit tool at any point. So anything you place on the whiteboard, you can adjust very easily with this multi-purpose tool. In fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and clear the content of the whiteboard to show you the next tool, which is the shapes tool. Much like the line tool, any of the shapes you see here can be easily dragged and dropped directly onto the whiteboard. These can include very simple options like circles, slightly more advanced ones like square root symbols, and so on. And you'll even see we have number lines, number graphs, and polyhedral shapes for any of your patrons who might need help with any of these different problems. And so with that in mind, once you've chosen them, you'll even see some expanded options appear, such as the option to change the minimums, maximums, or intervals of either axis of the number graph, for example, and some of the other options available as well. And then from there, it's just as simple as dragging and dropping. We like to make sure that the whiteboard was easily populated with these different kinds of shapes. So if patrons are working on math problems and are kind of having a difficult time working through the equation format of these problems, we easily put them right up on the whiteboard so they can work with them right from the jump. And so, in addition to these different tools available through the whiteboard's interactive space itself, I'd like to head back and over to the right-hand side briefly to also show you the paperclip icon. So, as you can imagine, this is a pretty universal symbol for uploading a file. And of course, you can share any files that you have directly with Brainfuse's coaches directly through this area. You can upload any files you have, whether it's a resume or cover letter or an application. You can easily upload it clicking on this link right here to upload it from your device directly, whatever computer or device you're working on, or you can share it from the Brainfuse Cloud Pack. So this is one of those account features I mentioned earlier on, and I'll be showing you likely as we reach the conclusion of our webinar today specifically. And so apart from the emoji icon down here, which will hopefully let you send a smiley to your tutor when your session is all done, that about covers all the different tools and functions available through the Brainfuse whiteboard. Again, where all of our live sessions take place through, whether that's a resume, job interview, or general job assistance live session. And so whenever your patrons are all done with their session, they can, if they like, click on the quit icon just up here, or they can close out the whiteboard altogether if they'd like. Either option in this case is perfectly fine. Now, if this were a standard live help session where we were going through live resume expert, interview coach, or job coach, then in this case, you would actually be given the opportunity to complete a post-session survey if you would like to, explaining whether you felt the session would help improve your resume or your job application process, if you recommend JobNow to a peer or to a friend, and so on. And so at the end of every live session, your patrons are given the opportunity to leave us that feedback if they'd like to. We even leave our contact information in case they'd like to reach out to us directly as well. We would not be anywhere near where we are today without patrons' feedback. So we like to make sure that survey appears at the end of every session that they properly enter through these areas here. And so whenever your patrons complete any one of these Brainfuse sessions, in this case, if they've created a Brainfuse account and accessed one of those sessions while logged in, they can access those sessions playbacks anytime that they'd like to by heading directly to the My Past Sessions area here under their account features. It's certainly one of the most popular account features and is a big reason we recommend patrons create a JobNow account. In this case, you'll see every single one of the live sessions that they've had on their account are saved here indefinitely, permanently, for them to review anytime they'd like. And so in this case, this zero subject do not select is that kind of demo session I went into before. Because nobody entered this session, in this case, it just says zero subject. It was just me kind of fooling around on the whiteboard. If someone had joined, you would actually see this appear as Brainfuse Meet instead. And you would see all of the playback of the interactions between myself and whoever else there was. But in this case, just showing you for context, you can click on the play link and watch a full video playback of that same live session that just took place. So you can see all of the messages that were exchanged between you and your coach in the chat area, and all of the steps taken on the whiteboard itself as well. So every erasing, every drawing, every different shape or equation included on the whiteboard, everything is played out for you step by step, so you can get some immediate feedback from the session you just had. Or if this is a session from a long time ago, you could take a look back at something you learned in that session that really helped out. And again, you'll see them organized by the subject and the date and time that the session took place. And you'll even see some useful links to the side here. So for example, you can click on this link to see a track transcript of the messages that were exchanged in this particular session if you'd like, and you can even print it from that pop-out window. And then just over here, you'll see the option to download a receipt. So if you have any patrons who are working on these job coaching sessions and would like to download proof of the session that took place to show to either a career counselor they're working with or somebody at the college they're in, for example, they can easily do so through this link, getting a receipt showing the date and time of their session, the subject the session was in this case, or the experts that they worked with, that expert's username, and the date and time of that full session. And so, yeah, the My Past Sessions area is an especially great place to point patrons to, and a reason really to create a Brainfuse JobNow account, since they can always access any session that they've had on their account permanently through this area. And so now I'm going to kind of show you guys the remaining features available by going through each individual section, in this case, starting with the resume area first. So after accessing a live resume expert through this first area up here, you'll see we have a number of different tools under each of these respective sections. So under the resumes area, we include, for example, a number of resume templates. In case your patrons might like to download some of these, for example, we have templates that they can work from instead of having to start from scratch with a particular resume if they're coming to JobNow for the first time and really just getting started with their process. So we have templates that they can download directly, including Spanish language versions of those same templates as well. In addition to templates, we've also compiled a list of resume resources as well. We re-include the templates here just in case patrons miss them the first time and might like to access them. But in addition to that, we also have military resume templates for any patrons who are returning from the armed forces and are entering the civilian workforce, for example, different resume guides, and even veterans military skills translators for veterans in those same situations where they want to kind of translate the skills they learned in their time in the armed forces into a job in the civilian sector. And a number of other resources here that have been compiled from a number of different locations. So anybody looking for resources for resumes outside of the templates we have available, we've also compiled a number of different things here as well. You'll also see a link just here to the Resume Lab. This is arguably JobNow's next most popular feature, if there can be one in particular. This is an area that your patrons can go if they'd like to submit their resumes to Brainfuse resume coaches without having to enter a live resume session to get feedback. Instead, within one business day, your patrons will receive feedback from the resume coach that picks up their resume directly to their Brainfuse account. In fact, the Resume Lab is one of those features of JobNow that would require a Brainfuse account to access. If your patron clicks on Resume Lab without having logged in or created a Brainfuse account, they'll be prompted to do so there and then. And so with that in mind, if they'd like to submit their resume or cover letter to one of our experts, they can do so directly through this area here. They're given the opportunity to upload that file from their computer or device directly, or again, from the Brainfuse Cloud Pack. And then from there, if they have any particular kind of context or feedback to provide to the coach that's picking up their resume, any particular areas of focus they'd like the coach to focus their analysis on, they can include that specifically in this area just here. And so from there, based on that, once the user clicks on submit, they can then return to their Brainfuse account directly after submitting their resume or cover letter and head on over directly to their My Message Center just up here under their account features after one business day. From there, they'll actually be able to access, much like the My Past Sessions area, a full history of all of the submitted documents and returned reviews from the Resume Lab. And so in this case, you'll see I submitted this resume the other day and then had it returned by a tutor, or excuse me, a coach in this case, just underneath it. As you can see, that's me there, so I just read tutor. But in this case, yeah, this is the returned review from the coach. And after one business day, your patrons can go to the My Message Center under their account features to retrieve these reviews. They'll see the coach's username, a brief message from them, the date and time of the returned document, and can click on the document right here to download it themselves. I've actually already opened this document just here, just to give you guys a look at what a pretty typical Resume Lab review looks like. And this is it. Every one of our Resume Lab reviews at minimum begins with this page that you see here, the Brainfuse Provider Response Form, specifically the career writing response form. This response form gives coaches the opportunity to break down the user's resume into an overall analysis of the greater strengths and weaknesses that are taking place within the user's work. And so in this case in particular, at the start of the provider response form, you'll see some general suggestions included by our coaches in this case, specific to, of course, general suggestions about resumes. So keeping them to under 2 pages in length, avoiding an objective section typically, and general pointers that you'll see kind of come up pretty specifically throughout many different areas of resume assistance. We also re-include our templates right onto the provider response form itself. We like to make sure that for any information patrons are looking for, they're never more than one click away from that answer. And so with that in mind, if your patrons would like to just create a new resume from a template instead of kind of working on the version that they had created, they can access that template straight from the document itself. From there, the coach will then include some more detailed feedback specific to the user's resume itself. So if there were any particular issues with spelling or grammar, for example, if the organization of the resume itself wasn't as strong as it could have been and didn't really emphasize a lot of the experience required for the position they're applying for, general advice like this will come in this section specifically, giving right up front to the user all of the most detailed, important information about how their resume can be improved and what can be done to correct it. From there, after the coach's full feedback in the provider response form, the coach will then include the text of the user's submitted resume itself, oftentimes either with their own in-text comments or notes notated in a different color. So here you'll see this is the user's resume with all their information included, and in some sections you'll see the coach actually included their own text in different colors so that the user can either populate this area with something else or they can kind of correct it as needed. And so if any folks familiar with Brainfuse's academic services, Help Now, for example, we also provide a writing lab through Brainfuse JobNow as well. And you'll see that later as we approach the Adult Learning Center section. But beyond that, before getting too far ahead, our Brainfuse Writing Lab has a similar function and foundation for its feedback as well, where a provider response form and in-text comments in the student's original work are provided to give a full context review without having to enter a live session to do it. However, unlike a writing lab review, where a patron really doesn't gain any benefit from direct edits by a tutor, since that would just be doing work for a student, in this case, resume lab submitters, those users who submit resumes to our coaches, oftentimes do gain benefits from direct edits by these coaches. In this case, many times coaches will actually take the user's original text and adjust it to show them how their resume can be best fixed, even just by a simple format change, changing none of their information, but showing how an organization and a good style can really make a resume pop out. And so in this specific case, this is actually what happened with this user's resume. And so whenever you see a coach who adjusts the user's resume, they'll actually include the original resume as part of the file to show them exactly how much can be improved by, again, a format change, a structure change, or any of the kind of simple things that you can do just to make a resume stand out from other submitters. And so, yeah, this is what a pretty typical resume lab review looks like. And again, your patrons can retrieve these if they've submitted their resumes to the resume lab by heading on over to the My Message Center under their account features right here. And so proceeding on through, the last section under the resume area is Optimal Resume. This is an often sadly overlooked tool that really provides a lot of useful things for patrons. And so in particular, Optimal Resume, once you've created and begun the process of building a profile with Optimal Resume, included any information you'd like to as part of a resume you might create, for example, then Optimal Resume will bring you to its document center. Scrolling down a bit, you'll see this document center includes the option to create new resumes, cover letters, and portfolios, all of which you can create from a wealth of different templates. These templates are broken down into the levels of the position, whether that's entry, mid, or executive, fingers crossed. Beyond that, you'll also see resumes and templates tailored to specific careers. So if you're looking for something at a mid-level in an advertisement agency, you'll actually see resumes specific or templates specifically built for ad agency jobs. Same thing with sales, same thing with managerial positions, and a lot of other examples. So you can create resumes from different templates, same with cover letters and with portfolios, and create all these different files and have them saved to Optimal Resume directly, which you can then send off to different jobs based on what your different positions you're applying to are. So this is a great place to create a wealth of different resumes and cover letters for different positions you're applying to. But in addition to these options, there's again some really overlooked areas of Optimal Resume that are really useful. For instance, just below here, you can actually use this area just here to take practice interviews. In this case, you'll actually be able to see pre-recorded questions from Optimal Resume's own kind of interviewer, or this like a sort of a dummy interviewer. And so from there, you can actually record yourself responding to the interviewer's questions to get a sense of exactly how well you answered the question, whether you can improve your diction or presentation, how you were dressed for it, if that actually helps. And yeah, how you can really practice for an interview on your own without having to connect to one of our interview coaches if you don't want to. This is a really great example of some of the options available at Optimal Resume. And then finally here, you're also given the option to, as you can see, this is pretty great, you're given the option to create free websites through Optimal Resume to host any of the files you create through the resumes, cover letters, and portfolios section. So if you'd like, instead, you can have a resume, cover letter, and portfolio of all your photography that you're sending off to a photography position created on a website. So that way you kind of set yourself apart from the other 21st century job seekers without sending a kind of wealth of documents off to an individual. You're just sending one simple, attractive website with your information included for them to look at on their own time. And so, yeah, Optimal Resume is a really great place to point patrons to if they're looking for different templates for different resumes and cover letters they'd like to create, if they'd like to take practice interviews without entering a live session, or if they'd like to host a lot of this information on a website. All of this is available for free through there. And so we're proceeding on now to the job interview section. Again, the first option is to connect to one of our live interview coaches, much the same as our live resume experts and job coaches. You connect through the whiteboard with these experts and can connect with them as you need to. In addition, we've also compiled a list of interview tips at Brainfuse specifically. We've broken them down into a number of different sections that patrons can access through on their own time. And then from there, you'll see, for example, common questions and sample responses, how to dress for the interview, general questions that come up, and a lot of other tips that your patrons can use through here directly. So if they're looking for materials to kind of prep for an interview without entering a live session, for example, we compiled a wealth of tips under this section in particular. And then here you'll see the online resources section. This is compiling external resources to other interview prep tips. So this includes kind of different interview tips in general, how to dress for the interview, and even 100 potential interview questions by Monster, which of course many folks are familiar with. So anybody looking for resources outside of Brainfuse, you can find them through here as well. In addition, of course, to the optimal resume interview section available, of course. And then finally, we move on to the career section. So again, job coaches in this case are available if you have questions that fall generally outside the resume and interview section area specifically. So again, if you're applying to a position for the first time, if this is your first job hunt altogether and you just have broad questions about the process, then a job coach will be here for your best bet for anything that falls outside of resumes or interviews specifically. In addition, you'll also see the unemployment assistance section. This is, for any folks unfamiliar, this is a relatively new addition to the JobNow area. And for any folks who are looking for live assistance or general resources on unemployment benefits in their area, they can, in this case, connect to our live unemployment benefits navigators if they need that help. They're available same times, 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time, in this case every day. An unemployment benefits navigator is available to answer any questions that a patron might have about beginning the process of applying for these said benefits, where they can find information on specific benefits in their area or updates to said benefits over time. And for a time, of course, specific COVID-19 benefits that were available for folks was part of the information available. And in fact, you can still see that information available under the resources area here if you'd like to access content based around different unemployment benefits available, broken down by region, and also explaining kind of general broad categories all over the country as well. So for any folks who are struggling with their job hunt, who would like to get some information on unemployment benefits available to them, you can access one of our live online navigators, or you can get those resources directly through our resources area here, which actually will link us to a later area of the career section, and I'll be showing you guys in just a bit. In addition, just here, you'll see the career assessments area. So here we compile a number of different career assessment tools available from around the internet. In this case, many folks will be familiar with the ONET Interest Profiler, but we even have the Career Zone self-assessment options and other aptitude tests that your patrons can take if they'd like to as well. However, unlike these career assessments, we also have our own sort of quote unquote in-house Brainfuse career assessment. In this case, it's just down here, eParachute. So if any of you folks on the webinar today happen to be familiar with the book, What Color is Your Parachute by Richard Bowles, then you may have some idea of what this tool is. If not, that's perfectly fine. It was certainly not a requirement today. But with that in mind, eParachute is an in-house sort of career assessment available through Brainfuse for patrons. And with that, eParachute poses a series of questions to patrons once they begin to access the tool. These questions are broken down into the type of work that interests the user, the people they see themselves working with or working as, the fields they're interested in, whether that's public service, the arts, STEM, or something else. And under each of these different sections you see here, questions are posed in different formats, sometimes multiple choice, prioritizing from A to B, B to C, and then C to A to get a real sense of the ranking of the individual skills or desires. And from there, there'll even be questions that are sometimes short answers, where the patrons are required to type out answers. And from there, once the patron has completed answering these series of questions, eParachute will, at the conclusion of the process, build a profile for the user that not only pairs them with a number of different career paths that best suit them based on their responses, but each of these different career paths will also include links to job websites where they can begin applying to those said careers, different resources online for how to best prepare for different careers in those fields, and in many cases, in fact, where you'll see they're paired with, or the users are paired with careers that require an advanced degree or something akin to that. You'll even see under eParachute for that said career, they'll include links to different, for different degree programs throughout the country that your patrons can then begin applying to. So yeah, if at this point in their career prospects, the patron is still not quite sure what career best suits them, if they're just beginning their search, or if at this point in their lives they really want to narrow down what it is they want to work on, then eParachute is a great place to point patrons to. Any of those patrons who specifically are struggling with the beginning of the process, or again, might like to get a sense of or perspective on the different career paths available to them based on the skills they already have. So from there, skipping back again just a little bit, just here you'll see the job resources section under the career section. Here we've compiled a list of both nationwide and local resources for job seekers. Under the nationwide section here, you'll see a number of different links that likely, again, folks are pretty familiar with. You'll see Indeed, Career Builder, Idealist, Simply Hired, and a number of resources that your patrons can click right on through to and begin applying for jobs if they like, or searching for them at minimum. You'll also see job websites for students and recent graduates, as well as job websites for veterans. So there's many tools available through here that your patrons can look through from a number of different resources throughout the nation. But with that in mind, besides nationwide resources, you'll also see a link specific to local resources for job seekers. In fact, this specific page that you see here is customizable. So you'll see we have a number of links here that are specific to different counties throughout the Southern Tier Library System's kind of covered area. But with that in mind, if you have any specific links that you'd like to see included here that you don't see included right now, please feel free to send us an email to info@brainfuse.com, and we'd be happy to add any local job websites or resources right to this page directly. So this way, anytime your patrons access this page, they'll have a number of custom websites for them that are bringing them right to the exact areas they need to be applying for their jobs through, or different resources they might not have known were available right in their backyard. So again, if you have any links you'd like to see added to this page for job seekers, please just send us an email to info@brainfuse.com, letting us know, and we'd be happy to include it on this page for your patrons. And so finally, under the career section is the skill surfer right here. This is a tool that actually repeats throughout all of the different Brainfuse features that we provide. And in this case, this is essentially our online content library. It's where your patrons can go to access all of the materials that Brainfuse has created in-house to enhance their experience with the platform. So in this case, under the JobNow skill surfer, unlike our other skill surfer libraries, you'll see content ranging from academic materials from high school, even all the way through until college, and even extensive areas in career prep and job resources, unemployment benefits, nursing school exams, ESL content, and a lot more. So each of these different sections then contains lessons and other tools available to patrons. So again, for example, under the career prep and job resources area, which is specific to JobNow, you'll see a whole lot of different career information and credentialing coursework available here, including options for lawyers, civil service professionals, electricians, financial managers, and quite a lot. Again, you can see there's just a wealth of material available to work through here specifically. In addition to other general job resources, career information for COVID-19, essential computer skills, and a lot more. Heading on back a bit just to show you some more of the more detailed information as well. Under the college area, for example, you'll see we break down the different topics available by general topic and then by specific subject. So under math, there's trigonometry, calculus, liberal arts math, and so on. Clicking on through to any of these individual skill surfer areas, you'll actually then be able to see all of the practice tests, text lessons, video lessons, interactive quizzes, and all of the content that we've created in-house for these respective areas. Frankly, it's very easy to get lost in the skill surfer with the amount of material that's available. And so with that in mind, as patrons complete these different lessons and so on, you'll actually see that the icon to the left of them change into the theme color of the page. That way it's easy to keep track of what you've worked on previously or what you'd like to still work through. In addition, you'll also note at the top of the Skill Surfer page the options to send a question or get live help in specific areas that have paired live experts available to assist in. So actually, you'll see under pre-algebra, you can get live help or send a question into one of our academic tutors if you'd like to. In fact, JobNow does not just provide job and career assistive services. We like to make sure that any patrons who are coming to JobNow who still might need some additional help with high school as they're completing their GED or working through any credentials they need and are kind of struggling in some of their online academic coursework. We like to make sure that these opportunities are also made available to your patrons. With that in mind, I'd like to just also briefly show you that this practice test that I took here, for example, oftentimes Brainfuse provides a lot more information than patrons otherwise expect on the results of these practice tests that we have available. So for example, in addition to a score that is given to the patron, oftentimes a score is really not enough to describe what particular skills areas the patron was struggling with or where they need to improve on their next performance. So with that in mind, in addition to a score, every one of our practice tests also includes a complete skills breakdown of all of the skills that are tested within incorrectly answered questions. So the patron can actually get an immediate sense of what they struggled with on the test and even go back into the previous skill surfer area to access lessons built around those exact skills. You can even click on through to any one of the individual questions of a test you took to not only see the answer that you provided, but also the correct answer and an explanation for every single question as well. And so for context, any of these tests that you take through the Skill Surfer at any time, you can check out those results if you'd like to by heading on over to the My Tests area under your account features. Here, you'll see a full breakdown of all the tests you've taken on the Skill Surfer. You can click on through to the test name to see the detailed breakdown of those skills, for example. But you'll also see the date and time the test was taken, the score you received, and you'll have the option to retake that test if you'd like to as well. And so with that in mind, heading on back briefly to the JobNow homepage and through the account features, I'd like to show you the remaining of these account features before proceeding on into the Adult Learner Center. So we already covered the My Calendar area by sort of a roundabout way, but this is an area that allows your patrons to, if they'd like to, host their own whiteboard sessions directly, rather than just entering a live session with a coach or navigator. If they'd like to have a studying session with their peers, they can actually organize it directly through this area and work through a whiteboard together. Speaking of which, the My Brainwaves area is another academic or account feature that directly uses a version of the whiteboard to enhance patrons' experiences as well. So under the Brainwaves area, you're actually given the option to create your own videos if you'd like to, using the Brainfuse whiteboard. Heading on over here to the Create a Brainwave area, you'll see a pop-up with a bunch of tips and clues on how you can use the Brainwave to your best benefit. But with that in mind, I'll just click on Begin Recording here to show you guys that we're in a sort of identical whiteboard to the one we had our session in before. Except it's just me in here, and I can use all the different tools of the whiteboard and type up different steps as I'd like to, for example, work on a problem with myself in the whiteboard, and so on. And so with that in mind, just to show you that any brainwaves you create are saved to your library just below, you can click on the play link right here to play a full video playback of a video that you created. In this case, this is just a kind of simple polynomial problem solving step-by-step thing I did just for an example of how you can use the brainwave as one instance. But with that in mind, any brainwaves that you create through this tool, you can actually edit at any time that you'd like to, play it, of course, directly, and you can even share it with whomever you'd like to with a valid email address by clicking on this link just here. And so that brings me to a little roundabout area that I'd like to show you guys. It's a really useful way to use the brainwave tool. And that's that if you head on over to the My Past Sessions area just up here, any of the live sessions that you've conducted on your JobNow account, you can automatically convert into a brainwave by clicking on this link here. So if you'd like to send off the full video playback of a session that you had to a friend who's going through a similar struggle, to someone who might benefit from a lesson that you learned, or just to prove that you in fact connected with a coach, to a career counselor, for example, you can convert that full session into a brainwave. And then heading on over to the My Brainwaves area under your account features, you'll see it included. And of course, you can send it off to whomever you'd like. And so the final account feature to mention for today, and certainly one of the first I mentioned overall, is the My Cloud Pack area. This is actually, ironically, one of our most popular account features despite its location on that list of features. And so with that in mind, it's essentially a small take on cloud storage service for Brainfuse users. It allows your patrons to save any files they'd like to their account directly. So this way, if they're logging into JobNow on a number of different devices or from different locations, whether that's on their mobile device, on the go, at home on a computer, or at the computer in the library, this way they don't have to remember to bring around a flash drive with them or email a file to themselves or have to worry about where that file is located. If they have a resume that they're continually working on or something that they're really kind of chipping away at overall, and they'd like to, they can save it directly to their Cloud Pack. They can create folders to organize their files into, and then all of the files they have here once they log into Brainfuse are accessible to them. They can upload them to the resume lab if they'd like, share them in any live sessions, whether that's with a resume, job interview, or career coach, or even share them with their peers in a Meet virtual study room session through the My Calendar area if they'd like to. And so, yeah, this is just a great place to have a one-stop location for all of your files through your Brainfuse account. So if you're accessing Brainfuse in a number of different locations, those files will follow you wherever you go. And then last but not least, I'd like to draw your attention to the Adult Learners Center just up here. So this is an area that's provided as part of the JobNow experience to any patrons who came to JobNow primarily for job assistance, but also might need some academic assistance along the way. We've included a lot of information here for their use. For example, on the right-hand side, just to show you briefly, well, actually, before going into that, you'll note all of the different academic tools, or excuse me, the account features are all included up here for the patrons to click on in through directly. We found in many cases, some adult learners don't know exactly where these account features are located, so we like to make sure the links are all just right and visible at the top of the page. Beyond that, over here in the lifelong learning section, you'll actually see some very specific tools from our Help Now service are brought to the forefront here for your patrons to use. These include 2 different versions of live online academic tutors. If you'd like to enter a live session with one of our tutors for a simple problem that you're working on, perhaps you have a homework assignment you're struggling with in some advanced math class you're taking, you can access one of our live online tutors directly through here. However, if you'd like a kind of slow burn of a session, something that a coach or a tutor in this case can work with you on to build some skills in a particular course with you, if you're working through a class and you'd like to repeat tutoring through this adult learning center, then the skills building area is certainly going to be the best bet for you. Similar to the resume lab, as I mentioned before, we also have a writing lab available. If any of your patrons would like to submit their writing, whether that's a piece of fiction, poetry, an essay, or some narrative that they're writing, they can submit it directly to our writing tutors, and within 1 business day, receive that same styled feedback as you saw under our resume lab section directly to their Brainfuse account. Under here, you'll see the test center. This is another direct link to the Brainfuse skill server. So all of our different academic content materials are all linked directly through the Adult Learner Center as well. And then finally, there's a Send Question Center. This is similar to the Writing Lab and Resume Lab, except specifically, instead of submitting a resume or any written material in particular to our writing tutors or to our resume coaches, you can instead submit any question you like to any one of our academic tutors without having to enter a live session to do so. Just like the Writing Lab or Resume Lab, these responses will be sent directly to your message center 1 business day later. And then finally, on the left-hand side over here, we have a number of different areas specific to adult learners with a kind of reverse approach to how we normally do our options. For example, here under live tutoring, right? If I were to go into live tutoring, from there, I can select the proficiency level and then the subject that I'd like to get assistance in. So typically we ask the user to specify what kind of help they're looking for and then specify the area of assistance they're looking for help in. So they'd specify they need tutoring and then they'd specify they need math tutoring, for example. However, here on the left-hand side, the reverse approach was taken, since many adult learners like to specify what area of help they are looking for first, before then specifying the kind of help they need in that content area. So for example, under high school equivalency preparation, you'll then see the options to access studying materials, take a practice test, or access one of our live online tutors from there directly. The same applies again to the US citizenship test. If you're looking for any of our practice materials, would like to access a live coach or tutor, or take a practice test directly, all of these options are available here. And then finally, there's also Microsoft Office help. So if you'd like to access a coach or tutor, or access some of our lessons and content created around Microsoft Office, whether that's PowerPoint, Windows, Word, etc., you can get that help through here. The last 2 sections here actually repeat different areas of JobNow. Oftentimes, the Adult Learning Center is used as sort of an alternate take on the JobNow experience. So we like to make sure some tools from JobNow are still brought here in case a patron needs it. So here, the career resources again are available, linking the same nationwide and local resources you saw before. And then finally, the Write a Winning Resume section will show you our examples and templates for resumes, our live online coaches, and the option to submit to the Resume Lab as well. And just as one final note, just up on the top of the page here, you'll see the ALC home link here brings you back to the standard Adult Learning Center experience. However, clicking on home here will bring you back to JobNow as a whole. All right, and so I believe that about covers all the material that I had prepared for today. So I did just want to first of all thank you all for attending today's Brainfuse JobNow demo. I appreciate your patience in sitting through the demo. We almost went the full hour today, so again, I really do appreciate everybody sitting through this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know.